Hey there, and welcome to the project section of week 6 of Intro to Web Dev, where we've learned about for loops and arrays so far. So you've learned about for loops and how they can be used to kind of repeat some logic for doing multiple things in your code. And then you've learned about arrays, which let you store multiple values in a single variable. And you've learned about how they are kind of best friends and can be used together to use a for loop to kind of iterate over an array of values and do something with each of those values, or for each of those values, hence the name of the for loop. So now you're ready to dive into this week's project. So just to get started, I would check out the repo, check out your copy of the repo, and check out the README, and you can read through the requirements. But the gist of it is you are going to find some text, and I am saying that it's a speech, but really the text can be pretty much anything that you want. It can be something from a book, a movie, TV show, poem, whatever. You know by now, I think, how this works. Anyway, once you pick your text, and the only requirement I have about that text is that it needs to contain at least 100 words. So something like "Hello World" is not enough text to be super interesting. So I'm saying that it should be at least 100 words. Anyway, after you have that text sort of picked out, what you're going to do is write for loops that do each of these 5 things. And there's starter code, of course, so let me jump over to that just to kind of preview that. And so I'm in my project repo directory here, and in week 6 for loops, I have the index.html file and the script.js file. Those are the 2 files that you kind of need to care about for this week. You're free to add styles and stuff in styles.css, but you absolutely do not have to, so I'm not going to be looking at that too carefully. So I'm going to open up both of those files in my text editor in Atom. So I'm going to start with index.html. Maybe I'll close that little section. Let me make this a little bigger. And as always, I think the first thing you should do is just kind of read through it line by line to get a sense of how the code works. So you've got some HTML tags, you've got some head tags up here that kind of set up the file structures where it points to styles.css and script.js. That's all good. Then you get to the body section, which has an onload event attribute of display speech stats. And we don't have that in this file, so presumably it's in script.js, okay? And then there's an h1 tag, a p tag, it's empty, and then an h2 tag, which is like a heading, and then an empty ul tag. Okay. And notably, the p tag and the ul tag both have IDs. Okay, so we've got an onload attribute which calls a function, and then 2 elements, both of which have IDs. So I'm guessing that that's what the script.js file uses. So let's jump over to that file, and I'll say right at the beginning that this file does contain a fair amount of code, but a lot of it is actually comments. So if you haven't found this by now, if a line starts with 2 slashes, it's a comment, and that's like more for the humans reading the code than it is for the computer. The computer will actually ignore lines like that, comment lines. So a lot of the code is actually comments. So that's for you to read to give you a hint about the code. And the other thing I want to point out is that a lot of this code you don't actually have to change. So it's here for like setup purposes. So here's a variable that points to a string, which is a speech. In this case, it starts out as lorem ipsum, which is just placeholder content. You can change this to anything you want. This is where you come into play. And the other thing I'll point out here is that this uses backticks, which defines it's called a template, but it's a special kind of string where you can set up things like multiple like new lines and stuff, and it'll work. Whereas if these were single quotes or double quotes, that kind of thing wouldn't work. If that confuses you, no big deal. You can use single quotes just like you have in other projects. But I wanted to point that out just because it's a little different than what you would have seen before. Then we get into some of the setup code, and honestly, I would say for now, just ignore it. This line of code removes any punctuation. So if you have things like periods and commas and whatnot, it will remove those characters from your text, which makes it a little easier once you get into the logic below. And then this line of code takes your string, which it's just a string of characters like you've used before. It's a string of individual words. And this line of code on line 18 converts that string into an array. So now you have an array where that array contains each of the words. So I'm not going to count them, but in this case, lorem would be at index 0, ipsum would be at index 1, dolor would be at index 2, and so forth and so on. And so that's all the setup code. Like I said, you can kind of ignore those two lines. They should just work, and you shouldn't have to touch them unless you want to customize the behavior. Now we get into display long words, which if you remember is, display long words is called from display speech stats. So let me start there actually. So in body on load, you call display speech stats. Let's go to the display speech stats, and display speech stats is a function that does two things right now. Right now it says document.get element by ID speech.intertext equals speech, and speech is the variable up here. And this line of code sets the content of this element to that speech, okay? And then calls the display long words function. And then the display long words function gets the element by ID long words, okay? So that's this, it gets this element and then uses a for loop to do something. And we can look at each individual line in the for loop where it looks at each individual word and then uses an if statement to say if the length of that word is more than 5, then we add it to the page, to this long words element. Okay, so that's all the starter code. And the next thing I would do after reading through it is trying it out. So let's open up index.html in my browser. And there you see the sort of result of the code that we just saw. So we see, let's go to the content here. If I look at index.html, first you see this h1 tag, which is just speech stats, and then you see PID equals speech. And notice that it starts out as empty, but we use DOM manipulation to, right here, set the content of that element to the speech. And I did this just because it means that you only have to put your speech in one place. In JavaScript here, you don't have to put it in your HTML and in your JavaScript. Your JavaScript is sort of handling all of the content. And then next what you see is long words and then a list. And if you look here, you see we have an H2 element called long words, where it just contains the static content long words, and then a UL, which is an unordered list with an ID of long words, and populating that UL is what happens here in display long words. That's what this logic is doing. It's filling the UL with these individual LI elements. Okay, so that's the start. That's the starter code, and that's what it contains now. So I'm going to go one step further based on some feedback that y'all gave me. You said that it would maybe be helpful to see like how you would start writing code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at this the README in the repo, and I'm just going to look at the requirements. I'm going to maybe pick one and just kind of start it out. So words that start with the same letter as my name. Okay. Well, first of all, what I would say is like the first thing I would do is pick out a different speech. And that would be, going to your favorite search engine and finding a speech that you like and then replacing the text here. I don't think I'm going to do that just because I think y'all know how to do that by now. If you want more help on that, please reach out and let me know. But that would be copy, paste, and pasting the text into here. But again, let me know if you want some more help with that step. Anyway, so now that I, in theory, have my speech picked out, the next thing I would do is I would probably just do this in order. Actually, I would start probably with this one. Words with less than 4 characters is going to be very, very similar to display long words. So yeah, let's maybe start with that. What I might do is define a new function, and maybe I would call that like function what did I call this one? Display long words, display short words. So I'm creating a function using the syntax that we learned a couple weeks ago, where I've got this function, and now when I call this function, the code I write here will run. And the way I recommend coding every time is like one line at a time. So what I might do is start out with just getting an element and setting its text. So let's do that. I'm going to copy paste some code, just one line at a time. So maybe I'll say like short words element equals get element by ID, and then here I'll say short words, which means in my HTML I need an element with that ID. So I'm going to say short words and short words here. And I'm kind of annoyed that I put a new line here, so I'm going to maybe change that now. And whatever, you can change any code you want. I'm going to do it like that. So now I have an H2 tag that contains text short words, and then a UL tag with an ID of short words. Okay, which means I can use it over here in my script.js file, display short words. I'm getting that element, and just for funsies, I'm going to say like short words element dot inner text equals hello. And I'm doing this because I want to test that everything's connected, right? So let me refresh this and another thing I want to do is like open up my developer tools so that I'll see any errors that I get. Oh my goodness, that's so big. Anyway, whatever. So errors I get will be here and huge, fine. So I'm going to refresh this and I'm going to scroll down and I see short words, and I don't yet see my text that I expected to see. I kind of expected to see the text hello, and that's because nothing actually calls this yet, I believe. So here I call display long words, but I don't actually call display short words. So let me copy that. Maybe I'll paste that here. Okay, so now in display speech stats, which again is called from the onload function, so the body loads and then calls display speech stats. Display speech stats calls display long words, and now calls display short words as well. So let me save that and refresh. And all the way down here at the bottom, I see hello here. Just for the sake of the video, I think what I might do is comment out display long words, just because this is kind of taking up a lot of room. For you, I wouldn't comment it out probably, but for the video, I'm going to make it a little easier to see. So here's the hello that I'm printing out. Okay, so I've got that part working. So let's keep trucking. So I think that what I want to do is something very similar to display long words. Again, my goal is to display words that are shorter than some length, shorter than 4 characters. Okay, so if my length is 1, 2, or 3, okay. And I want to, so maybe I'll start out with an array. So there's a couple of different ways I could do that, but let me do it the sort of indexy way. So I'm going to say for let I equals 0. I is less than words array. I think that's what it's called. And honestly, I could have just copy pasted this line of code, but whatever. Words array is the name of the array that's being created here. Okay. Words array dot length, and I'm going to increase by 1 each time. So now I've got my I variable. I called it I. You can call it anything you want. You could call it index maybe. I think that's actually a better variable name, but I is a common one in for loops. And I'm going to get the word. Actually, I'm going to steal this code. And for now, I think, like I said, I recommend coding like sort of one line at a time. I'm going to print out the word to my console. Okay, so let's go back to my browser, and I'm going to refresh this, and I expect to see all of the words printed out here. So I'm going to refresh, and there they are. It's Latin, and I don't know what any of that means, but it's all placeholder content. So in your code or in your console, you'll see your speech here. Okay, so that tells me that this for loop is working and this line of code is working, and so I've got each word. If I saw an error there, like let's say I like accidentally typed index here and I used the wrong variable or something, here's what would happen. I would refresh and I would get this kind of error, and because I've only written like 2 lines of code, I know that the problem is somewhere here. And in this case, index is not defined. Well, it's a little obvious here because I purposely made the mistake, but it's a little hint as to where to look. Anyway, I'm going to refresh, and there we go. Okay, so now I have my word, and I think what I want to do next is, again, it's going to be really similar to this. I think I'm going to have an if statement that checks the length of the word, and if the length is, in this case, less than 4, then I'm going to print out some content. So actually, I think I'm going to just copy paste this whole thing. And the thing I'm going to change is now if word.length is less than 4, or I could do like less than or equal to 3, same kind of deal. And I think this code can stay the same, so let me just double check. First, I am creating a new element, an li element, and I'm setting its inner text. Okay, now long words element, I don't think this will work. Actually, let me run this and see what happens. So just to kind of demonstrate the process of sort of debugging, go and refresh, and here's a common error that you'll likely get when you're writing JavaScript. Some variable is not defined. Okay, so it's on line 46 of my code. So if I look at line 46, hey, that's the line of code I just wrote, and it's saying long words element is not defined. This is not defined, and in this case, that's true because I took this line of code from this display long words function where we did have a long words element, but in this case we called it short words element instead. So I'm going to change that to this, and maybe for debugging purposes, what I'll say is maybe I'll move this here to be up here, and I'll say console.log less than 4. All of this is just for debugging, so I'm not going to worry too much about what the text of that is because I'm not actually going to show it to any other humans, well, other than you watching, but whatever. I'm going to refresh, and so a couple things. First, I'm a little surprised that I don't see the content here, so something might be broken. So let's take a look. If I scroll all the way up, okay, I don't see any errors, but let's just look at the code. So it's running through the text, and here it is, lorem ipsum dolor sit. I don't know if I'm saying any of those words right, but once it gets to sit, it does say less than 4. Okay, so I do think that my logic is working. When it gets to set, it's less than 4, do is less than 4. Okay, so let's go back to the code here, and so that stuff's working, but I think that I might be missing where do I add? Let me read through this code. So I've got my for loop working, I've got my if statement working, then I create a word element, which creates an li. Then I say word element dot inner text equals word, which I create here, okay? And then I say short words element, which I define here, dot append child word element. I would sort of think that would work. The reason I'm a little bit confused is I don't see the short words printed out here. I would have expected them to print out right here. And this is, I'm going to roll with this. I'm not going to edit this out because this is a good example of here's an actual error in my code somewhere. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to trace through the code. So I know display short words is being called because stuff is being printed to my console. Okay. And then I get short words element, and where do I do that? Where do I change this to hello actually? Let's find out, where did I put that? Now I'm trying to just resize my stupid window. Oh my god. For the purposes of these videos, I make my my screen really tiny so that it's easier to see in the videos, but it also makes it really hard to do pretty much anything. All right, let's get rid of some of this stuff. All right, where did I do that? Okay, so I think here's the problem, actually. Yeah, so in display short words, yeah, I see what's happening now. Okay, so in display short words, I get the element, okay, and then I have a for loop which we know is working because of these console.log statements. Okay, and we append the children to the short words element, which is building out the list of short words. And then the if statement comes to a close, and then the for loop comes to a close. I could clean this code up a little bit. The for loop comes to a close, and then we're still inside of the display short words function. The last thing I do is I set the inner text to hello. So basically this line of code is overwriting all of the content that I had before. And the reason I figured this out, or the way I figured it out, is I said, wait a second, if I go to this output, I'm still seeing hello. So where did I do that? I asked myself, and I did Control F for hello to remember where that was. And that's when I realized, like, oh, right, because I'm doing this at the end, it's going to kind of undo everything that I had done above. So let me backspace this. Let's get rid of it. Let me save it and refresh. And there we go. Now I've got my short words. And, you know, maybe I'll put back in the call to display long words so that I have both. Refresh. And so I've got my list of long words. I've got my list of short words, and that means that I have finished this requirement. So then next I would move on to words that start with the same letter as my name. And, you know, I'm not going to model that one, but the idea would be very similar, where I create a new function, maybe display words with my name letter. You know, I don't know. I don't care about the name of the function. Just call it whatever makes sense to you. And then call it here. And then one line at a time, sort of develop the code that accomplishes the goal. In that case, it would be outputting words that begin with the letter of your name. I think the structure is going to be very similar to the first two functions. Then you know, I'd work through the other ones. I will say that the last three are a little bit different. So the longest word or the shortest word, there you're only displaying a single word. Every third word you are displaying, you know, every third word, where I don't know a different way to say that, but like I would not display 1 or 2, I would display this one. Then I would skip this one and this one, and I would display this one. Skip this one and this one, display this one, skip this one and this one, and display this one. So skipping by 3 or by 2 each time, depending on how you look at it. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then the last one is words that aren't the most common words. I think I might actually create a separate video to run through this one, just because it's combining a bunch of different things that might be tricky. But that's how I'd approach this project, and actually that's how I'd approach every project, is by sort of splitting it up into smaller pieces and then working like one line of code at a time, testing it out, and when it doesn't work, doing that debugging process of narrowing it down and figuring out what's going on. Anyway, then when you are done, and submit it to GitHub, and then submit it to me. And then, you know, as always, get ready to show off all your work. Okay, so that's the project for this week. I just wanted to create this video to run through it and maybe get you started. But as always, of course, please let me know like what questions you have, or if you want to chat or just talk about what you're working on. That's my favorite part of all of this. So please don't hesitate to reach out. All right, good luck, have fun, and I'm looking forward to what you're going to create. Bye for now.